The history of war isn't just made of triumphs, it's also full of colossal waste. While some engineers were building legends, others were pouring dead-end ideas into steel. Tanks that broke under their own weight. Tanks that killed their own infantry. Tanks that couldn't stop a standard machine gun. Today, we're breaking down 5 of the least effective tanks of the Second World War, sticking strictly to the facts and the test reports, just the technical truth. Picture 1933. Rolling across Red Square is a steel battleship almost 10 meters long. 5 turrets, 3 cannons, 5 machine guns. This is the T-35. A symbol of Soviet industrial might. But behind that parade ground spectacle was an engineering trap. The designers at Nikolai Kalepsky's design bureau were chasing a concept, a breakthrough tank that could fire in every direction at once. The problem was basic physics. Protecting that much surface area meant armor of enormous thickness, but armor that thick would have made the tank too heavy to move at all. So the T-35 ended up with just 20 to 30 millimeters of armor. In 1935, that seemed like enough. By the start of the war with Germany, though, any German anti-tank gun, even the notoriously weak Pak-36, nicknamed the Door Knocker, could punch straight through this battleship on tracks. But armor wasn't even the biggest problem. The real killer was the transmission. The M17 engine, essentially an aircraft engine repurposed for ground use, was pushed to its absolute limit, just trying to move 50 tons of steel. The gearbox failed almost every time the driver attempted a sharp turn. Reports from the 34th Tank Division in June 1941 tell a grim story. Of the dozens of T-35s lost that month, only a handful were actually destroyed by the enemy. Most simply broke down on the roads of western Ukraine, stripped clutches, seized engines, abandoned where they stalled. Crews wept in frustration as they blew up their own machines, vehicles that couldn't cover 20 kilometers without falling apart. It was the end of an era, the era of the multi-turreted land battleship. Japan's engineering philosophy followed its own, very particular logic. The Hago was built for the war in China, where the enemy was infantry without so much as an anti-tank rifle. Under those conditions, the Hago looked like a king of the battlefield. Fast, agile, and more than capable. But the wider war demanded something completely different. When Japanese tank crews came up against the US Marine Corps, reality hit hard. At its thickest point, the Hago's armor was barely 12 millimeters. To put that in perspective, a standard American heavy machine gun, mounted on a Jeep or an armored car, could punch through the Hago's side armor from 100 meters away. In practical terms, Japanese tankers were going into battle wearing steel clothing that only stopped rifle rounds. Inside, things were even worse. Most Hagos had no radio, so the commander directed the crew the only way he could, by literally kicking the driver's shoulders to signal turns. The asbestos lining, meant to insulate against heat, turned the crew compartment into an oven in the tropics. Men were passing out from heat stroke before they ever laid eyes on the enemy. The Hago is a case study in what happens when military doctrine freezes in place while an opponent's technology keeps moving forward. If there were an award for worst ergonomics in tank history, Britain's Valiant would win it hands down. By 1944, while the rest of the world was fielding T-34 85s and Panthers, the British were still working on a heavily armored infantry support tank. The idea itself wasn't bad. Build something small but nearly indestructible. What they actually built, though, made veteran test officers recoil. The Valiant's worst enemy was the Valiant itself. The driver's position was so badly designed that stamping on the brake could trap your foot between the control levers. The levers themselves required something close to a strongman's grip just to operate. A surviving 1945 test report from the Fighting Vehicles Proving Establishment tells the story in a single line. One tester drove the Valiant just 13 miles over rough terrain, climbed out of the hatch physically exhausted, and refused to continue the trial. He said driving the thing wasn't service, it was physical torture. The Valiant became a lesson for engineers everywhere. A tank can have the thickest armor and the biggest gun in the world, but if a human being can't actually operate it, all you've built is an expensive pile of scrap. Soviet engineering was never short on ambition, but the A40 project belongs somewhere in science fiction. The problem it was meant to solve: how do you deliver a tank to partisans deep behind enemy lines? Parachute systems of the time weren't reliable, and there weren't nearly enough heavy transport aircraft to go around. Legendary aircraft designer Oleg Antonov had an answer: strap wings onto the tank. The base vehicle was the light T-60. To get an almost 8-ton glider into the air, the tank had to be stripped down to a bare skeleton, turret removed, ammunition unloaded, fuel drained to a minimum, even the fenders and headlights taken off. The only test flight took place in September 1942, towed by a heavy TB-3 bomber. The moment it left the ground, things went bad, fast. The drag from the glider's massive wings was so extreme that the bomber's engines started to overheat almost immediately, and the tow plane nearly stalled into a spin. The pilot had no choice but to release the tank early. Test pilot Sergei Anokhin managed a remarkable feat of flying, gliding the flying tank down to a safe landing, jettisoning the wings, and even driving it to the nearest airfield under its own power. But the project was shelved for good. The lesson was clear. Towing that kind of load didn't need a bomber. It needed a purpose-built heavy tug that simply didn't exist in 1942. And finally, the absolute peak of pointlessness: Ferdinand Porsche's monstrous creation, the Maus. 188 tons of dead weight. This wasn't a tank built to fight an enemy army. It was a tank built to argue with physics itself. Hitler dreamed of a wonder weapon that could stop entire divisions single-handedly. In reality, the Maus became a hostage to its own mass. Look at the numbers. Just rotating a turret weighing 50 tons, heavier than an entire T-34, required enormously powerful electric motors. The Maus was a hybrid. A diesel engine drove generators, which powered electric motors at the tracks. That setup consumed a staggering amount of copper, a metal that by the end of the war was more valuable in Germany than gold. But the real killer was logistics. The Maus couldn't cross a single bridge in Europe. They would have simply collapsed under it. Special railway flat cars had to be engineered just to move it, and those were feats of engineering in their own right. And if it got stuck in the mud, recovering one broken-down Maus would have required 3 other Maus tanks working together just to pull it free. When Soviet forces closed in on the testing ground, the Germans realized the steel monster couldn't even retreat. Both prototypes were blown up by their own crews. We covered the Maus's armor design in detail in a previous video, but the bigger picture is this. The Maus stands as a monument to what happens when one dictator's ambition overrides common sense and drains an entire nation's resources in the process. The story of these 5 tanks teaches us a lesson far more important than the takeaways from any single failure. A tank is merely a tool, not an end in itself. 5 turrets, a pair of wings, or 188 tons of armor might look impressive on blueprints, but the outcome of a war is ultimately decided by logistics and reliability. These 5 examples clearly demonstrate what happens when design complexity crosses the line from the reasonable into the absurd. Let us know in the comments, which of these projects do you think was the craziest? This has been Steel Chronicles. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you in the next episode.